afternoon, everyone. My name is Cynthia Body Willis. I am a member of the League of Women Voters of Montgomery County, Maryland. Welcome to this afternoon's program, The Economic Impact of COVID-19 on Women in Montgomery County. Let's begin with some housekeeping details. This fall Lunch and Learn is being presented by the League of Women Voters of Montgomery County. You've likely noticed that we're not providing lunch. We instead have urged and do urge you to support women-owned businesses in the county by choosing to order a midday meal from one of the vendors listed by the Conference of Visitors Bureau of Montgomery County, Maryland, Incorporated. You will find the link in the chat box. This webinar is being recorded and will be available on the League of Women Voters YouTube channel. That web address will also be in the chat box. All participants in the meeting will be muted during our speaker's presentation. A Q&A session will follow. We encourage you to ask questions. Click on the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen, type your question into the box, then hit send or return. We will answer as many questions as time allows. Our program is scheduled to end at 1:30. So with that, I am very pleased to introduce this afternoon's speaker. Lynn Stein Benzian is the Director of Economic Development at Montgomery County Economic Development Corporation. She has expertise in helping businesses locate, grow, and expand in the county. She was the former Vice President of Strategic Planning for the Business Development Board in Palm Beach County, Florida, and served as the Deputy Director of Rockville Economic Development Incorporated. She is a graduate of the University of Virginia and has been designated as a Certified Economic Developer by the International Economic Development Council. She is one of only 1,200 individuals to earn that designation nationwide. So it is my pleasure to invite Lynn Stein Benzian to begin this afternoon's program. Lynn?
Thank you so much, Cynthia. I really appreciate being here today. Thank you so much for inviting me, you and Amelia and Cindy. I'm really excited about talking to you all today, and I hope we can all learn some things together. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. I just want to, again, thank you all for letting me be here today. I'm really excited about it. I do want to start by acknowledging some folks who really made a difference in this presentation. First off, Brandon Bedford, who did much of the data gathering the first time I presented on this topic in June. Cynthia Body Willis, Amelia Brust, and Cindy Snow of the League of Women Voters, you have all been tremendously helpful to me as I prepared, and I thank you very, very much. So most of the numbers that are in this presentation are national. Local numbers lag, and we really won't know them for months. But we can extrapolate the scope of the issues here in Montgomery County by looking at national and state trends. I will bring in the local data as I can, and I'd like to acknowledge, let's see if I can make, there we go. And I'd like to acknowledge and salute Kristen Latham and Caitlin Simmons of the Montgomery County Office of Legislative Oversight. They put together a terrific report on the impact of the pandemic on women that was released in July. They did a huge amount of research and they talked to a lot of people. I will quote liberally from this report, and it also led me to a lot of sources where I attempted to find updated data. If you want to look at it, it's a little bit long, but it's really well worth the read and very readable. The information is on the screen. So I think we need to start with the very most basic of things. Thanks to the Harvard Gender Sci Lab, we have statewide data on COVID cases by gender. In Maryland, women account for 52% of the cases so far. This seems to track the U.S. as a whole, in that women outnumber men in case count. As of 3 days ago, Montgomery County had 82,039 of those cases, state cases. It's probably fair to assume that about 52% of them or so have been in women. That would be about 42,660 cases among women in Montgomery County. Although women account for the majority of cases in Maryland, men account for the majority of deaths, 52%. Again, that tracks the U.S. numbers as a whole. Men account for more of the deaths than women. As of 3 days ago, in Montgomery County, we suffered 1,705 deaths. If Maryland statistics are applied to Montgomery County, that would be approximately 818 women. I do not have disaggregated data by gender for race, but national data indicates that the difference in mortality rates between Black and white women is very significant, and that Hispanic and Latino people are most likely to have contracted COVID, while Black and African American people are most likely to have died from it. All things have never been equal, either before or during this terrible time, and we are going to talk about those inequities today. We're going to start with some major general impacts from the pandemic. National reported food insecurity for everyone increased from 3.4% before the pandemic to 9% in 2020. Manna Food reports that food insecurity in Montgomery County has nearly doubled since the pandemic began. You are seeing Manna Food's FY 2021 numbers. They had their fiscal year ended at the end of June. For comparison, in 2019, Manna served 34,250 people with 3.1 million pounds of food. Last year, the agency served 50,510 participants, that's 2020, with 3.3 million pounds of food. All kudos to Manna Food for scaling up so quickly, so well. All of their employees, all of their wonderful, wonderful volunteers, thank you for doing this very, very valuable work for our county. Now, the Office of Legislative Oversight estimates that 13 to 15% of renters in Montgomery County are behind in rent. As of February 2020, as of February 2020, there were 14,000 failure to pay rent cases that were waiting to be heard by general district court judges. Since the courts opened, they have been hearing 2,500 rent cases a week. According to the Montgomery County Office of Maryland Legal Aid, about 65 to 70% of their rent case clients were women before the pandemic, and this percentage has remained constant, but the absolute number has increased. As of early September, the county has distributed more than $37 million in rent relief to around 6,600 households, according to Montgomery County Health and Human Services. More than 10,000 applications have come in for that program, and just under 50% of those applications have been fully processed. About 20% are currently active with caseworkers, and about 33% are waiting for processing. Montgomery County's rent relief program includes about $59 million from the federal government, and it offers up to $12,000 in rent relief for renters who can show that they owe at least $1,000 in back rent and have made at or below 50% of the county's area median income of $99,000 and change. The program is still open, and the link is on your screen, but the easiest way to find it is just by searching Montgomery County, Maryland Rent Relief. I hope you will take advantage of it if you need to, and please help others access it if you know of their need. According to the OLO, most county stakeholders cite housing and food insecurity as their largest concerns for county residents. But cuts in transportation service are also an important consideration. These disproportionately affect front-facing workers in service, hospitality, and in healthcare. And these folks have no option for telework. And these sectors are heavily populated by women. Since 78% of ride-on customers are Black, Indigenous, or people of color, and 47% of ride-on customers have an annual income of less than $30,000, any change to that system disproportionately affects them. Good news? The county suspended ride-on fares during the pandemic and recently announced that free fares will continue through the rest of 2021. The county is also examining the adoption of a new $1 fare and considering maintaining free ride programs for children, seniors, and persons with disabilities post-2021. If that's something that you feel strongly about, that might be something that you want to stay engaged with. Now I'd like to examine some of the complex ways that the pandemic has affected women's health. These graphs show the folks who report having gone without health care during the pandemic. Now, the advantage of Zoom meetings is that you can get really close to read these small letters, but I'm not going to make you do that. The green bars represent men. The dark blue bars represent women as a whole. I suspect that it's not a big surprise that women as a whole continue their pre-pandemic trend of taking care of others before themselves. Pandemic health care cutbacks affected everyone. The light blue bars are women in excellent or good health. But I want to put a spotlight on the medium blue bars, which reflect women in fair or poor health. 46% of them skipped preventative health services like checkups or tests. 32% skipped recommended appointments, and 40% couldn't get an appointment at all because of the pandemic. 18% didn't fill a prescription or skipped or halved doses to stretch their medicine. Now, having health insurance has affected healthcare in some surprising ways. In this slide, the gray bars represent uninsured women. The orange bars represent women with private insurance, and the blue ones represent women with Medicare. It seems logical that women with either private insurance or Medicare report having received COVID tests at higher rates than uninsured women. But for the other measures of care, I was surprised to learn that women with insurance skipped care at higher rates than those without. I have no idea why. And like a lot of things during the pandemic, it doesn't seem to make a lot of sense. It's just another thing that will require some further research, and we may not know the answer for a long time. I expect that many of you have heard about long COVID. Studies over the past few months have shown that about 1 in 4 people with COVID-19 will have symptoms that last longer than the typical 2 weeks. We call that long COVID. It occurs for people with both severe and mild or even asymptomatic cases. The most common symptoms include pain, breathing trouble, high cholesterol, fatigue or malaise, and high blood pressure. But there can be a lot of other symptoms, and depression, anxiety, skin conditions, heart issues, gastrointestinal distress. My daughter just told me yesterday that she has a colleague who has developed type 2 diabetes, and her physicians have told her that that is a result of the COVID-19 infection she suffered last year. This slide combines information from a large new study by Fair Health, which was reported in Time magazine in June, with information that The Guardian gathered and analyzed in a June article entitled, "Why Are Women More Prone to Long COVID?" I find the parallels between long COVID and the other long-term diseases that affect women at higher rates to be so striking. Historically, not as much research money or attention has been provided to conditions that primarily affect women, and there are anecdotal reports that these biases apply to long COVID as well. So there are some research during the pandemic that is teasing out some of the differences between the way women and men respond to COVID-19 and presumably to other viral infections as well. Now, when I am not giving presentations on economic things and doing other similar items at NCEDC, I am a life science specialist. I get to work with a lot of really great life science companies in the county like Novavax and GSK, AstraZeneca, and some that you've never heard of like Cartesian Therapeutics. And they're just terrific companies, and I really enjoy doing it, and it feeds my little research and science soul. So as I did a little research here, I really kind of wondered, why are women more susceptible to long COVID? So there are some good possible reasons. Each of you have in your body T cells. They seek out and destroy virus-infected cells. It's one of your body's natural defenses. There is a possible reason for them being more active in women. We have 2 X chromosomes, and many of the genes that encode the immune system response are located on the X chromosome. Hence, women express these responses more strongly than men. We have twice the power, if you will. Now, the pregnancy compensation hypothesis suggests that women of reproductive age have immune systems that have evolved to support the heightened need for protection during pregnancy. Now, that sounds great. And as we heard earlier, women are less likely to die from COVID. But scientists think that one of the reasons for long COVID is that the virus hides out in pockets of the body. They call them reservoirs. The COVID virus has been discovered in nearly every organ of the body months later. Since women react so strongly to the presence of any virus, these reservoir viruses can trigger inflammation, leading to the pain, fatigue, and brain fog of long COVID. scientists are also studying the possibility that COVID triggers our bodies to produce self-directed antibodies that attack our own organs. These antibodies generally decrease in number over time, but not for everyone. This has been seen in some chronic fatigue syndrome studies in women. More research is needed and ongoing. I'd like to believe that maybe we'll see some silver linings in terms of other diseases as a result of all the money and attention going to COVID. As a side note, thus money and attention has really benefited this county, as our life science companies have received record-breaking amounts of investment and are growing and hiring at a record pace. Now, this is a slide that might really have you getting close to your screen, so let me help you with that too. This Guttmacher study looked specifically at reproductive health. 1 in 3 women surveyed said that the pandemic has made it more difficult to access birth control, or that they delayed or canceled their OB/GYN visits. I'll admit it, I was one of the latter. As in most other things, minority women report higher levels of difficulty in accessing care. 38% of Black women and 45% of Hispanic women report that barrier, versus only 29% of white women. Pregnant women are not more likely to get COVID, but if they do, the CDC reports that they have more than a 2-fold increased risk of requiring ICU admission, invasive ventilation, or ECMO, which is similar to heart-lung bypass machines. It pumps and oxygenates a patient's blood outside the body, allowing the heart and lungs to rest. Pregnant people with COVID also have a 70% increased risk of death over non-pregnant people. Per the CDC, pregnant people with COVID-19 are at an increased risk for preterm birth, and some data suggest an increased risk for other adverse pregnancy complications and outcomes, such as preeclampsia and stillbirth. So my science head asks, why? We've got some new information about that. So for pregnant women, our hearts work a lot more. There's actually a 50% increase in cardiac output when we are pregnant. But more importantly for this purpose, we actually breathe more air. There's a 40% of increase in your volume, inhaled and exhaled, when you are pregnant, and a 20% increase in oxygen consumption. So this is great because you're breathing for 2, but it also means that you're breathing all this extra air and you have more chance of breathing in COVID-19 particles that are exhaled by other people. So I personally don't know anyone who doesn't admit to mental health stress related to the pandemic, but maybe I just know a lot of people who are in touch with their feelings. This Kaiser Family Foundation survey that was done in March really lays out the most affected people, and that's our young folks, ages 18 to 29 of both genders. 61% of them report major or minor effects to their mental health due to the pandemic. The reasons are obvious. They have really big things in their lives: school, starting careers, dating, choosing partners, forming their independence as adults. And those things were just halted. That disconnection is profound. But women are right behind these young folks. 58% of mothers report major or minor effects on their mental health, and 46% of those mothers say that they needed but were unable to access mental health services during the pandemic. Top reasons: they couldn't find a provider, they couldn't afford it, and that's followed very closely by the inability to take off work. 55% of women in general reported major or minor effects on their mental health during the pandemic, and with so many pandemic problems hitting women so hard, is it any wonder? Women report more pandemic-related changes in sleep, worry, health, productivity, mood, depression, and the combination of youth and femaleness is particularly difficult, as nearly half of women ages 19 to 30 report experiencing depression during the pandemic. The good news here is the newly legal ability to access mental health care remotely. It certainly has helped many thousands of people who would not otherwise have access. Now, making that innovation permanent is another legislative initiative that you could advocate for on the federal level if you are so inclined. I believe that this discussion would not be at all truthful if we don't address domestic violence. According to the CDC, pre-pandemic, approximately 1 in 4 women and nearly 1 in 10 men experienced intimate partner violence during their lifetime. It is very hard to collect data on intimate partner violence because many victims do not report or delay reporting for fear of reprisal or of getting the offender in trouble, or they believe that no one can help or will help. The vast majority of information about intimate partner violence during the pandemic is anecdotal, and the information lags by 17 or 18 months or more. Here's what we do know. According to the National Commission on COVID-19 and Criminal Justice, the number of domestic violence incidents increased by 8.1% after lockdown orders. The National Domestic Violence Hotline reported a 9% increase in total phone, chat, and text contacts between March and May of 2020. And those contacts involving emotional and verbal abuse increased by 90%. Those involving physical abuse increased by 61%. We also know that intimate partner violence is associated with a range of factors, including increased alcohol use, and sales of tobacco and alcohol skyrocketed during the early part of the pandemic. Plus, the lack of privacy during lockdown makes it very hard to reach out for help or resources. Again, women of color experience intimate partner violence at sharply higher rates than white women, 30 to 50% higher according to Very Well. And we have to assume that these trends, like pretty much everything else we've seen, have just been exacerbated by the pandemic. Now I'm going to start to discuss something that very traditionally lies in the economic development sphere: employment. I first gave this presentation on June 11th of this year, 4 months ago. So I'd like to take the opportunity to compare what we knew then with what we are seeing now. This slide shows labor force participation in percentages so that you can see the trends. Now, labor force participation is not the same as job loss. Women actually lost 4.5 million jobs during the pandemic. Men lost 3.7 million. Now, when most folks lose a job, they keep looking for a job. They look for another one, which means they stay in the labor force. But 2.9 million women left the workforce entirely during the first months of the pandemic. 1 million of them subsequently started looking again, but that still leaves us with 1.9 million fewer women in the workforce than at the beginning of 2020. This was my June slide. It shows labor force participation, those who are working, and combined with those who are looking for a job. In June 2021, labor force participation was 56.2%, and the same rate continued from May through August. It was just a little higher than the pandemic low, which was 54.6% in April. So I bet you'd like to know, how do we look today? This slide looks pretty similar to the last one, doesn't it? In September, women's labor force participation actually dropped again to 55.9%. I'm afraid we're not getting better here. We still have nearly 2 million fewer women in the workforce than we did 19 months ago. Now, this slide highlights the gender gap directly. Blue in both graphs shows men, and red shows women. Note that the pandemic affected men's and women's labor force participation in parallel ways until about September of 2020. You can see that in the smaller graph to the left, where everything kind of drops down real far all at once and then goes back up again, pretty similarly. But now switch to the larger graph. See how that red line on the left side dips lower than the blue one? That's because in September of last year, a lot of moms dropped out of work as the school year began because the children were home. Then, as vaccines became available around the first of the year and we saw reopenings, we had a lovely upturn in participation for both men and women. And then September came around again, and women's participation in the world of work dropped like a stone. This slide shows labor force participation since Q1 of 2019. The men's numbers are on the left and the women are on the right. Note that all the lines went way down between Q1 and Q2 of 2020, and most of them do go back up again, except the gray and orange lines on the right. Those lines represent Black and Hispanic women. Their labor force participation continues to decline even as others start to recover. Why? Well, it's the same problems we always knew. They're just compounded now. Unaffordable childcare, unsafe working conditions, low wages, in-person work requirements, inconsistent unemployment insurance that doesn't help people recover from economic shocks. Now, I have a key takeaway for you. Expanded unemployment benefits ended in September, but there is absolutely no evidence that the drop in benefits made people go out and get jobs, and it certainly did not result in expanded labor force participation by women. So let's delve a little more deeply into those 4.5 million pandemic job losses for women. Most of them were in low-wage occupations that employ a large proportion of women: retail, hospitality, childcare. In particular, women of color are disproportionately in those industries, and as we discussed earlier, they have less remote workability. When schools closed, people who rely on schools for childcare couldn't afford to pay for it. And even after schools reopened, parents were facing the uncertainty of their children having to quarantine at home if they are exposed to a classmate who tests positive for the virus. And they may not want to risk the health of their older relatives who were their backup providers during pre-pandemic. Now you can all see already on your screens the existing wage disparities. These were pre-pandemic. But let's look at it another way. The Pew Research report came out in May of 2021. It reveals that women made 84% of what men earned last year. That is absolutely unchanged from 2019. That's 42 extra work days to make the same amount of money. And finally, just one more thing to drop on us all. The cost of childcare rose 2.2% last year. That's a basic supply-demand equation. When demand goes up and supply goes down, the price is going to go up. And roughly 5 million women still report that they can't work due to child care issues. Since we're here, let's talk about child care. This industry, which is dominated by older women, was decimated by the pandemic. Until May of 2021, child care providers had to endure a decrease in enrollment due to distancing requirements. And those capacity limits have now been lifted, but providers still face increased costs from new PPE and cleaning requirements. So this is brand new information. I literally got it this morning about 2 hours ago. I talked to Jennifer Anais at Montgomery County Early Childhood Services. Now that's a great resource for child care referrals, information, education, all things early childhood. She told me that 98% of Montgomery County child cares have reopened, which is wonderful news. So we've lost 2%. Those have closed permanently. So I was pretty excited about this news until she informed me that all of these child cares, both centers and family daycares, are averaging about 40% of capacity. Those businesses estimate that at 40% of capacity, they will only be able to stay open until the end of the year. So why are parents not electing to send their kids back? Well, it's a variety of reasons. Fear of COVID is one. Higher income workers are continuing to telework, so they're probably feeling that they don't really need childcare as much. Lower income hourly workers are either unemployed now, or they lost so much income while they were unemployed during parts of the pandemic that they can no longer afford childcare. And then here's the ultimate catch-22. A number of parents are not coming back because staffers that they grew to trust are no longer at their childcare. And the centers can't afford to hire them back because they don't have the revenue from their clients. It's pretty crazy. On a whole other level, attracting a younger childcare workforce to replace aging workers is really difficult everywhere. In Montgomery County, the Office of Legislative Oversight reports that local stakeholders have asserted that MCPS, Montgomery County Public Schools, is actually the biggest competitor for many child care providers for employees because they offer higher wages and better benefits. To understand and go a little deeper the reasons behind the child care crisis and as it applies here, we need to understand living wages. Now, Montgomery County, to its credit, has raised its minimum wage to $15 for employees with 51 or more employees, for employers with 51 or more employees, and $14 for employees with 50 or fewer employees. A very small employer that only has 10 or fewer employees is required to pay $13.50 hourly. The county will continue to track incrementally towards $15 an hour for most employees over the next few years. Now, that's minimum wage, but it's not the same as living wage. MIT has a wonderful living wage calculator that can be used to find the living wage. That's what's actually needed to pay one's expenses for any jurisdiction in the U.S. This is Montgomery County's living wage as calculated by the MIT calculator for a single person, for a number of people. For a single person with no children, that living wage is $19.82 an hour. That's $41,222 annually before taxes. Remember that number, that annual number. It's coming back. For a single person with one child, that hourly living wage is $38.42, or $79,909 annually, pre-tax. In Montgomery County, if you're living on a minimum wage job, you need to be working full-time and live with someone else who is also working full-time for at least minimum wage. And children, really, really hard for you to support them. Now back to the competition for talent between child care centers and Montgomery County Public Schools. Remember that living wage of $41,222? Note that not a single one of the child care jobs on your screen provides a living wage in Montgomery County. Now, MCPS teaching positions require college degrees, so they are not accessible to many women in the child care industry, but even lower level positions at MCPS can offer a better deal for them. At MCPS, the lowest starting salary for a teacher's aide or a paraeducator is $15.53 an hour. For a 9-month position, that's roughly $22,300. That's more than child care center aide working 12 months. And they have quick potential for increased wages via experience and training, plus union protection. We are very fortunate in Montgomery County that our teachers make a living wage, but do keep in mind that the numbers you're seeing are average wages. The entry-level salary for an MCPS teacher with a bachelor's degree is $51,513. Montgomery County is very much aware of the child care shortage as a limiting factor, not only for individuals, but for our larger economy. There are several state and county programs currently available to working parents to help pay for child care: the Montgomery County Working Parents Assistance Program, the Maryland Child Care Scholarship Program. Universal public preschool for 3 and 4-year-olds has been proposed as a child care solution in some jurisdictions. Now, there's a caution with this idea, and that is that child care centers and home daycares have a very small adult-to-child ratio for children under age 3. And it is impossible for them to stay in business without the revenue contributed by older children with their lower ratios. So if we go to universal public preschool for 3 and 4-year-olds, we may actually endanger our ability to find childcare for our babies. So something to think about. Montgomery County Council does have a brand new proposal, it was just introduced in the last week or so, that takes this into account, and it may be quite innovative. This proposal would incent businesses to assist their employees with child care costs by providing grants to cover up to 50% of those employer contributions. The program would presumably help pay for child care at the county's private providers, giving that local industry a boost. And such a subsidy might also help smaller county companies compete with larger companies for employees in today's tight labor market, maybe even helping those child carers compete as well. So the devil's always in the details. We don't really know them yet, but I do think it's worth keeping an eye on this proposal and maybe perhaps helping to shape it well. So we just received the September jobs report last week. Now, these monthly reports get a whole lot of press, so I think I need to address them. The good news is that American businesses are adding jobs, although this slide reflects the relative optimism of the summer. In June, we added 962,000 jobs, and in July, we added 1.1 million. Job growth slowed down a lot in August and September. In August, it was 235,000, but nationally, only 194,000 jobs were added in September. That was well below the 500,000 that some analysts were predicting, or perhaps praying for. But here's the key fact. We are still down by nearly 5 million jobs in the US since before the pandemic. But unemployment, hey, that's going down, right? I mean, we pay a lot of attention to the rate of unemployment in this country. It's one of the first things that people ask me about when they hear I'm an economic developer. A whole lot of folks were excited to see that the unemployment rate fell to 4.8% nationally in September. And it's 5.9% in Maryland. Local data lags, so we know that it was 5.6% in August, so not bad. But now that we have looked at labor force participation, we understand that unemployment rate is down not so much because more people are being hired, but because fewer people looked for work, especially women. We also should note that there is a huge education gap in hiring. In September, employment grew by 350,000 among those with a college degree or some college, but it dropped by more than 430,000 for those with a high school degree or less. In addition to the straight unemployment rate, we also need to pay attention to the absolute number of job gains and losses. In September, 182,000 men joined the labor force, but 309,000 women quit work or halted their job searches altogether. There are currently 11 million job openings in the US and 7.7 million unemployed people. But the fit between worker and job is not always the best anywhere. I can assure you that that's the case in Montgomery County as well. And all the anecdotal stories say that workers are just done. They're revolting against poor pay, stressful and dangerous conditions, and they just simply refuse to be undervalued anymore. 4.5 million people quit jobs in August. That's 2.9% of the workforce. And guess who quit the most? 892,000 workers in restaurants, bars, and hotels, 721,000 in retail, and 534,000 workers in healthcare and social assistance are female-dominated industries. That said, another 606,000 folks in professional business services also quit. So frustration is pretty universal. You might have heard it called the Great Resignation. It's real. Now, this story is largely all about women leaving the labor force, but I would like to break it down just a little bit more because I find it truly revealing to do so. These are seasonally adjusted numbers. Remember that national rate is now 4.8%. Nationally, white and Asian women are right in there, but our sisters of color, they are not. Hispanic and Latino women's unemployment is 2 points higher than white women, and Black and African American women's unemployment is 2.5 points higher. This is another already existing equity issue. You can see it through time that is exacerbated by the pandemic. So what else can I possibly say about the unemployment rate? This number that we all look at as the great barometer of our economic health? Well, sadly, that number that we see every month may not be accurate at all. And a recent article in The Guardian tells us why. That bottom gray line you see shows the official Bureau of Statistics unemployment rate, the one that makes the headlines every month, the one that says that we're at 4.8% now. The middle line shows another BLS metric. This one is called the U6. This one considers not only the people who are out of work, but also the people who are working part-time jobs when they actually want more hours, maybe full-time, as well as those who have stopped looking for work but would take a job if it was offered. The U6 rate is currently 8.5%. This rate does not, however, include the people who stopped looking for work and can't accept a job now due to new pandemic factors like child and elder care duties. Now that top line, that's called the true rate of unemployment. It is from the Ludwig Institute for Shared Economic Prosperity. And it not only includes the discouraged and the underemployed, but also anyone making less than $20,000 a year. Why? I mean, they're working, right? Well, $20,000 is the absolute lowest living wage in any of the states. Remember that MIT calculator? Now, if they're making less than that, then we know they're not making a living wage and they can't support families. So this line may provide a truer picture of the economy's ability to provide a living for its people. The true rate is currently 22.8%. Now that we've gone through all of this stuff about labor force participation and true unemployment, I really like to share this particular slide. I call this the "Why do we care" slide. Gross domestic product will be the last thing that I define for you today, the last economic term. GDP. We hear it all the time. It's the total of all value added that's created in an economy. It's the stuff we produce minus what it costs to produce it. It is the most common indicator that's used to track the health of an economy. This slide plots countries' GDP against their women's labor force participation. And lo and behold, the countries with higher women's participation consistently have higher GDPs. In fact, in the US, a 10% increase in women working is correlated with a 5% increase in wages for everyone in that geographic area. When more of our sisters participate in our economy, we all benefit, both collectively and individually. However, at the current pace, our labor market won't recover its pandemic losses until summer of 2022, so that's next year. Women's losses are going to take even longer to recover. We're probably looking at the fall of 2023 right now. We are currently transitioning as an economy from a goods-driven pandemic era economy in which the service industry, where so many women work, has really struggled. And we're going to go to a new and unknown normal. We're facing what is likely to be the second biggest economic reshuffling since World War II. So this is pretty sobering stuff. Our job at MCEDC is to mitigate these effects in our community by assisting our existing companies in creating new, high-paying jobs for our residents, ones that allow them to have that living wage here, and by attracting new companies that will do the same. There's a lot of great info on that at our website, as well as a COVID-19 business resources page. Now, I'm excited to hear from you all with your comments and questions. And I thank you again very, very much. Thanks to all of you for inviting me. And thank you to the League of Women Voters for all of your good work for our county and our country.
Thank you very much, Lynn, for that excellent presentation. I'm now going to turn the session over to our Q&A manager, Amelia Brust. Amelia?
Thanks, Cynthia, and thank you, Lynn, so much for that presentation. That was fantastic, and hopefully we will get a lot of questions. I know I have a lot of questions. So in order to ask your question, we encourage you to use the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. Type your question into the box and hit send or return. We'll try to answer as many questions as we have time for. Once again, we are scheduled to wrap up our luncheon today at 1:30. So I'm actually going to kick it off with a question of my own. Lynn, I wanted to ask you, because we talked about a lot of different components today for how to gauge the economic impact of COVID on women in the county and all of the different elements that we can study for impact. And that can include things like healthcare access and treatment usage, childcare, wage parity, rent relief, things like that. I wanted to ask from your perspective, what do you think should maybe be the priority for the county's response to helping women, A, get back into the workforce if they left it, and then also to progress and thrive in the workforce, not just to find a job, any job, whatever job is there?
That's a really great question, Amelia. I'm really glad you asked it. I think there are two priorities. The first one is childcare. It's a crisis. It really, really is. This is not an exaggeration. And I will tell you, I have felt that it is been a coming crisis for a very long time, years, because we just don't pay the people who care for our kids enough. We just don't. So nationally, we have to think about that, but I think it's really, really crucial for the county to, and we as county residents and and county employees to really try to address that. So I think that's super crucial. The other piece I think is really crucial is to address, there's always an imbalance between the kind of jobs we have and the kind of jobs that people are trained for. Now, again, I've told you all, I'm a life science specialist, so to some extent, I see that through those lenses. But I will tell you, it is one of the fastest growing parts of our Montgomery County economy right now. We have so many companies that are coming in wanting to establish their outposts here, research and development facilities, some small manufacturing. There's even administrative jobs and office work as well. That's the fastest growing segment. And there are a whole lot of people out there who just don't have the skills they need. And that's something that we can really address, and actually address remarkably in some surprising ways. So I'm going to give you an example right now, which is that most of you probably think, oh God, I have to have a college degree to work in life science, right? Right? Wrong. You don't, actually. There are an awful lot of life science research jobs and testing kinds of jobs that pay great wages. Many of them start at $50,000 a year, and you don't need a college degree. Now, you do need some training. Actually, Montgomery College in Germantown has one of the most fantastic training courses for this kind of work out there. In about 18 months, people can get fully qualified to get these kind of jobs in the life science industry, making this kind of wages. Oh, and by the way, most companies also pay for you to get additional training, so you can go back and get your college degree if you want. And the college would love to have many, many more people come and take this training. They have the capacity. Oh, and by the way, virtually every one of them is hired before they finish the training. It's phenomenal. So these are the kinds of things I think we need to think about in terms of really ramping up the kinds of ways that we connect folks who are in some of the lower level jobs, maybe with additional training and additional abilities to get them into these higher living wage jobs. And some of that work is happening now. Believe me, it's not a void. The college is working on some things. The county is working on some things to increase some of these programs. But I do think that over the long term, thinking that way about really connecting all of our workers in Montgomery County with these new jobs is just crucial, and to us as individuals and our economy as well.
Would it take legislation to ensure a living wage is provided for more workers in the county?
I don't know that it would. It's very hard to legislate a living wage. It really is. We've kind of seen that as the county, and again, to its great credit, legislated $15 an hour. That took years, and fight for 15. It's the national thing. It just costs more to live here. I don't know that it would necessarily be the proper way to go. I think the better way to go is we naturally, the market works really well, actually, for jobs that are needed. The market will usually will end up equalizing and paying what is needed to hire those people. So I think we can let that happen. That said, some jobs that require more training, we just have to connect people with that. I really think personally, I think that's the better way to go with it. Although certainly legislation is always something that we watch.
So you talked about how there are some women who left jobs during the pandemic and just have not gone back because they've actively stopped looking for jobs. Can you explain a bit or clarify who are those women that can do that? Do they tend to be in specific industries? Are they at a certain earning level? Are they usually in a certain age bracket, or is there just some other kind of emotional or psychological component that will motivate somebody to actively stop looking for work in an environment like this?
It's a great question. I don't know of any research that has really broken that out as well as it could. But again, we work with anecdotal stuff here. It's all over the board, Amelia. It's all over. We definitely have a lot of women who are fortunate. Maybe they have a partner or somebody who is still working, and so they're able to drop out of the labor force and just take care of the kids because the kids are home or intermittently at home. So there's some privilege there. There are people who have worked those hourly jobs, and what they're really honestly looking at is the fact that if they go back, they're not going to make as much money as it costs to get care for their kids. I mean, if that's and honestly, that's always been the case. It's really interesting. I've said this for years that I can't figure out how people are working minimum wage jobs because it costs them more. I think a lot of them, frankly, used family childcare and friends. And, there were a lot of sort of informal methods of childcare. With the pandemic, a lot of those go away because childcare has become dangerous. So I think there's a lot of that people just, the same equation they always did before, but they managed to make it work. They just couldn't make it work anymore. So they just said, I can't make this work. I can't make more money. I'm just going to stop looking. And then I also think that there is a psychological component. If you've ever been out of work, it is a full-time job to look for work. To be effective, you really do need to spend 6 to 8 hours a day looking for work. It's hard. You apply for so many jobs, you don't hear back from so many, and the ones you do, you get a lot of refusals. And this is at every level, okay? Every level. It's just really, really hard work. And if you're collecting unemployment, that's some work too, because you have to document all this stuff for unemployment. And I think it wears on people. It just wears on you after a while. And when the economy looks so terrible and nobody else is finding jobs either, and remember, we are still 5 million jobs under. After a while, at any level, you can just stop looking. The hope is that the economy gets better to motivate people to come back again, or that we provide them opportunities to make more money so that they can go, okay, I can do this again. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah. And so do you think it would be beneficial to provide direct financial aid to families specifically for childcare? Or do you see some possible complications or issues with administering direct relief that way?
Well, I think we're going to find out. If this county council proposal goes through, I do not know how they're going to do it. I don't know if they're going to do it, and I don't even think those rules have probably been promulgated yet. The proposal hasn't even been voted on. So I don't know how that's going to be done. Will it be an administrative work? Absolutely. Absolutely. Anything new, anything is. Do I think could be helpful? Yeah, I do. I absolutely do. If we allow people assistance in paying for childcare, then they can typically work. That's why the existing assistance programs are around, and they've been around for years, and they do work. Just at this time, they're way over capacity. We just need more.
Mm-hmm. So when it comes to training, do you think it would be a good idea not just to, increase access or availability of job training for things like life science careers, like you said, but maybe would it be in the county's best interest to set up some more training for child care providers? Because you talked about how it's hard to bring in younger workers to do childcare jobs, and that's a field that had primarily been handled by older workers, specifically older female workers.
I personally don't think it's a lack of training, although I also don't believe, I think training is always a good thing. There's actually a lot of resources for training for childcare workers in Montgomery County, an extraordinary number. Check out the Montgomery Office of Early Childhood. There's a lot out there. It never hurts to have more. I think the bigger issue, frankly, is wages and respect. Young people, if you can make more money working at McDonald's, and believe me, that is, as hard as that is, because I was a waitress for a lot of years. So it's hard work to serve the public. It really, really is. But but taking care of children is it's an awesome responsibility. It really is, could literally be life and death. And if you're being paid more for a job with less responsibility, if you're a young person, you might want to go for that. So I really do. I think in the end, it's about wages. It's about respect. It's about also and we hear this a lot from young people. One of the number one things that they look for in a job is the ability to self-direct, be independent, have some say in the work that they do and the way it is done, but also get the support that they need to do it right. That is a very, very huge factor for young folks. Well, for everybody really, but we hear it more from younger people who are at earlier stages in their career. These are very, very important factors, and these are the kind of things that we want in any field to increase if we want to attract younger workers.
Okay.
So maybe structural. Frankly, we may have to really look at the structure of how these things, how these fields, how these industries are.
Sure. And that, that's not surprising considering so many people have left these jobs because they just said the working conditions that they were unacceptable, and since the pandemic has, waned and waxed, they haven't seen enough of a change yet in the values that employers place on their employees. So there's something I did want to ask about that later, but first I want to jump to a question from an audience member that's a little bit detailed, so I'm going to read it off. We're learning again in this public health crisis that representation and trusted influencers are key to connection and engagement. Are the Economic Development Council and the programs you mentioned culturally, linguistically, and socially representative and connected in ways that are effective in making the influential connections you so recommend, i.e. connecting with lower income workers or non-white women, or women who are English as a second language speakers, getting them to training opportunities that are sensitive to their backgrounds and experises?
Wow, that's a knowledgeable.
It's a lot, so we can take it in chunks if you'd like.
Great. Well, let's see how we go with it. I think the question really asks a lot about Montgomery County Economic Development Corporation. So let me tell you a little bit about us. We are actually quite culturally diverse. If you go on our website, take a look at our staff, and I think you'll see that, both male, female, by age, by race, definitely by experience. It's been kind of fun, actually. I hired our former lawyer, I've hired lobbyists, we've hired all kinds, we have folks who really have a lot of wonderful experience, plus a full marketing department, and they know a lot of stuff. But it's, so I think we are culturally diverse. We work very hard at it. We are very aware that I don't believe that anybody is ever fully there. Okay, you have to, it's a process, and you have to continually work at it and continually pick it up at the top of your head. And there are those of us in at MCEDC who are continually reminding each other. I'm channeling my friend Daniel Parra, who's our director of diversity and inclusion, and he always says, are we thinking about this? We need to be thinking about this, and we try very hard to do that. We reach out a lot to businesses, to the places where we hope that folks who speak a different language, who come from a different cultural background, have connections to. That is very typically chambers of commerce. There are a lot of minority chambers of commerce in this county. Yay! And we try very hard to reach out to them. Language, we speak a lot of languages at MCEDC. I speak one language, English. I'm probably one of the few at MCEDC who does that. We have people who speak French, Spanish, Amharic, Greek, French. There's a couple of other languages as well. I think that I think we have. We might have Urdu. And we look for that when we hire. We look very strongly for that we know we need those folks. During the pandemic, particularly, we had a huge uptake in the number of small minority women-owned businesses that contacted us for assistance. And I personally served hundreds of them. And I know my colleagues did as well. And we were able to serve a number of them in their native language, which I'm really proud of. Are we 100% there? Nope. But are we fully trying? Yep. Very, very hard. Taking suggestions as well. I do happen to think that our marketing, we're working on things, and I love our marketing department. They're really, really top notch. But we're also working on some alternate ways to connect with folks that maybe we haven't connected before. So it's a work in progress. Again, taking suggestions. Very happy for you to communicate with me on that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was wondering how you think the county does in connecting women entrepreneurs and business owners, especially small business owners and women of color who are business owners, to assistance or loan programs and things like that. Because for example, I know the Federal Small Business Administration has goals that it sets for trying to offer, give awards or connect with those businesses, and they don't always meet those goals. And a lot of the reasoning they give sometimes is that, as much as they try, women don't know about these programs. But that always is interesting to me, because women like to talk to each other usually about stuff that they're doing. So how much of this is really at a certain point, does it need to come from business owners themselves talking to one another? Maybe. I know, it doesn't always have to be in the form of a formal chamber of commerce, but do you see possibilities for more women in business or workers to talk to each other about what they have learned?
Oh, absolutely. So again, we could unpack this one all day long. and this one, I do love this one. Women actually start businesses at about the same rate as men do. Interestingly, women entrepreneurs, they don't grow them at the same rate men do. And this has been pretty well documented for many, many, many years. That's one of the things, actually. If Maryland Women's Business Center, remember it. If you have never heard of it before, Maryland Women's Business Center, it's marylandwbc.org. It is the best place for women entrepreneurs to go to get training, to get connected with other women entrepreneurs, which is what you just talked about, Amelia, to really understand the things they need to learn, not just in their own industry, but how to run the business. That's a whole different thing. And you really need both to do it. Things like HR and accounting and, oh gosh, how do I select a QuickBooks program? And what do I do with that anyway? I mean, they have classes on everything, plus one-on-one counseling. So I do want to throw that out right now as a resource. SBDC, Small Business Development Center, Maryland SBDC, it's mdsbdc.org. Thank you, Amelia, for putting these in for me in the chat. They also provide a lot of this kind of one-on-one assistance as well. And so we, if they get to us, we're pretty good at connecting folks with the things they need. We're very, very good at in half hour, 45 minutes, maybe a little bit more, working with a business owner, figuring out what their needs are, top line, and then getting them to the resources that they need top line. So if a lot of them come to us thinking it's financing and then walk away going, I'm not ready for financing yet. I need to do some of these other things first to be ready for financing. They need to get their balance sheets in order. They might need to brush up their business plan and very, very clearly define their market and their marketing plan before they're ready. So we do. I think we do that very well. So does Women's Business Center. So do the various other resources around. But you put your finger on it. We work with the people who get to us. We try to market. We try to get this information out there. But there's always more ways to do it. You're right. Women talk. And we appreciate that. So this is my charge to all of you today, to talk. Anybody you talk to, please let them know that there is assistance available for entrepreneurs and small business owners in this county. There is a lot of it, actually. We have many, many resources. And we have heard that that the entrepreneurial ecosystem here doesn't hold a candle to some other ones, Boston, San Diego, San Francisco. We heard that. And there's a lot of fervent there for very specific tech type of companies. And we've heard that, yeah, we could do better. So these are things actually we're working on to try to create more of an entrepreneurial ecosystem, more connections. We have incubators here. And I mean, one thing we didn't have when I started economic development 18 years ago, we really didn't have a lot of private workspace that kind of acted like an incubator, the WeWorks of the world. It didn't exist, actually. There were 3 of them in Rockville at the time, 18 years ago, and a lot of them were full. Now they're all over the place. So there's a lot of places for people to go and start businesses or work virtually, or go in and kind of, grab a desk as available. And again, have that connection, talk to other people. So there's a lot of this available to us. I think what our job is to do is just to try to mobilize it and make it more of a culture of people understanding that, and everybody and people in every language understanding that these resources are available. So stay tuned. And again, suggestions welcome.
Are there relationships right now that exist between local businesses and training programs in the county, like community college training programs for jobs in fields maybe other than like life science or tech? Are there any other sort of training to job pipelines that exist in the county that you think more people, especially women, ought to be aware of?
I think there are a lot of them, actually. So Montgomery College, the aforementioned Montgomery College, has a rather marvelous program where they'll customize a training program for any company. They've done it for many companies, and they do they do that. I happen to know it best for tech companies because that's what I deal with most. But they'll do it for any kind of a company. And have done it. So there are a lot of training programs for ESL, medical, there's tons of those partnerships for medical, for social sciences and those kind of care. So yeah, those absolutely do exist, but the good news is that there's capacity to have more of them. So some of the places you can look besides the college, WorkSource Montgomery. So WorkSource Montgomery is the workforce provider in Montgomery County, and they're actually co-located with us when we're all together in offices, so that we can work closely together. Tons and tons of resources for both the job seeker and the employer, to help bring them together, to provide trainings, to guide people to the existing ones, provide funding for newer ones. There's some good state aid available for training. There's training dollars. So yeah, absolutely. There's quite a bit of it. And if what exists, so WorkSource can help you get to it. The college can help you. I also need to mention Universities at Shady Grove, which also has some really excellent and growing connections with our area, with our county businesses, to help provide them the workforce they need among college graduates. And I can't tell you how many times I have referred companies to USG and to the college, and also University of Maryland and our area higher education institutions, so that they can just recruit those students. It's that assistance is there, and a lot of companies are doing that.
Great. So we've talked a lot about childcare availability or lack thereof and the cost of it in the county. But what about people who have to pay for elder care, or who have to be at home to take care of older family members or friends? Is the county doing anything right now to give those residents some relief or assistance? especially since Maryland has a large waiting list for Medicare funded in-home care. And the pandemic has made a lot of people hesitant to place their loved ones back in a nursing care or assisted living.
Amelia, it is a great question, and the person who asked it, thank you for asking it. I think all of us of a certain age are dealing with these issues, and unfortunately, I don't know the answer. It's not something that I researched in preparing for this, which is kind of interesting since my own family members are looking at these questions as well right now. So I don't know the specific programs that are available or that are being considered. I'm certainly happy to research it. If the person who asked it would go ahead and reach out to me, you can just send me an email. It's Lynne, Lynne, @thinkmoco.com. I know somebody wonderful is going to put that in the chat for me. Please feel free to reach out to me, and I would be happy to find some research and see if I can find the answer for you.
Do you think then, kind of going along those lines, more employers in the county will have to offer remote work options for people who need to be available more often at home to take care of family members, or just because they find it more desirable or maybe more economically efficient to work from home rather than commuting into an office every day?
No question in my mind. The answer is yes. It will simply be non-competitive if they don't do it. I mean, they just won't. I see it in, almost every company I speak to is saying, yeah, well, we're going to go back. Well, most of them kind of keep pushing it back, but we're going to go back, but it's going to be hybrid. We're going to allow some flexibility. We're going to allow more flexibility than we allowed before. We have to do it to remain competitive, or our people and every company worth its salt knows that their people are the most valuable asset they have by far. And to keep them, it costs so much more to train a new person than to keep an old one. And your culture changes every time somebody leaves. I do agree with that, Amelia. That I think anecdotally, I hear it all the time, and companies are absolutely thinking that way.
Another thing I'm wondering may end up being a new cost or may affecting costs for employers is health insurance, because we've talked about it's still unknown at this point what the full effects are of like long COVID or just other side effects that could come out of this virus. And health insurance affects women. The cost of health affects women differently than men. And I think you had said in your presentation that so far, long COVID has affected women disproportionately to men. So I'm kind of wondering, do you see, aside from just jobs, is the health cost of COVID going to affect women worse than men in the county going forward, or is that too much of an unknown at this point?
I think it's a little unknown. It's a little early days, and I don't really know what the federal or state responses are going to look like for that. Mm-hmm. I think I would like to believe some things will be mitigated. We don't know. We do know that at least thus far, women are suffering from long COVID at considerably higher rates than men, although that varies. I've heard 58% higher. I've heard 80% higher. I mean, it's just like, it's all over the place. The research is too new. I just don't think we know that. Long COVID is really, it's going to take us a while to figure so many things out about it. So.
Mm-hmm. Is it, at this point, is it more economically beneficial for women, since they bear the brunt of childcare and child rearing responsibilities? At this point, is it more economically beneficial for women if schools were to fully reopen in the county? Or is that not really, does that not affect them in the way that we might assume it would? Now, I recognize this is putting aside the actual health and safety factor. I'm asking purely from a numbers standpoint here, like dollars and cents wise.
I think probably yes. I mean, if schools can be open consistently, and so much of being able to work is predictability. You want to know when your hours are going to be. Your employer wants to know when your hours are going to be. Predictability is, it's kind of, I kind of think predictability was a little underrated before the pandemic. Now I'm starting to appreciate it a lot more now.
Yeah.
I think that schools and consistency and children being able to go to them is a huge, huge piece of that. So, we put health and safety aside, all that, assuming that it can be. Yeah, I think that is will be one of the largest factors in allowing women to fully participate back in the labor force again.
Mm-hmm. Would, if schools were to fully reopen, do you think that would just naturally drive, more people to go back to childcare facilities that they had left? Or do childcare facilities have to still just operate based on whatever the capacity limits are, the social distancing? I'm wondering because you had said earlier in your presentation that so many childcare facilities just couldn't afford. It was sort of a chicken and egg situation where they couldn't afford to bring on more staff because they couldn't afford to keep it open with fewer kids, but they weren't allowed to bring in more kids. So if
they're allowed now.
Opening, does that, okay.
They are allowed now. All the capacity restrictions in Montgomery County have been lifted for childcare. So they are allowed to do so now. At first it was, you had it right on the head. When the capacities were much smaller, that was a real issue. But they've been lifted. So we're there now. Our schools are open as well. Carefully. And, I think we all know people, if it hasn't happened to us, who've gotten that dreaded call from school, your child's been exposed, you need to come get her, she needs to be home for the next 7 to 10 days. So those are hard things. But I think we're headed there. I'm really excited about vaccinations. I don't kind of need to wander into that too much, but it does appear that the FDA and the CDC are headed towards allowing vaccinations for children ages 5 and up. And I really think that can be a game changer. Especially here in Montgomery County where people get vaccinated. Kudos to all of you who have. Thank you. Thank you.
So are there any areas of the county where you kind of see, like literal areas, I mean like zip codes or neighborhoods or towns, that you are seeing are suffering more economically from the pandemic, and specifically women in those pockets are suffering more? And that could be also a factor of the jobs they are working in, the transportation maybe that has been available to them. And it's especially on my mind right now because I am a Metro user most mornings. And I'm whenever I hear Metro say, we encourage people to use alternatives, I think if people had alternatives, they would have used them by now. So I'm just kind of wondering, what do you think the geographic distribution of economic impact will be in Montgomery County?
Great question. My sympathies on Metro right now. It's really hard. It's just really tough. It's very much the same story we've heard, that the inequities that existed before the pandemic are the same ones now. There's just more so. So East County as a geography, Silver Spring, Wheaton, Down County has tended to be less well served by jobs and high quality jobs than up county and the western parts of the county. This is historic. I did not prepare a slide on this one. We can do it at some other time, or people want one, they can see it. There are actually there's a really lot of good data on this. And in fact, there's so I could send an awful lot of good information on, and we can take it right down to zip code. We can take it right down to census tract data on where these disparities are, and they are the same places that they always were. And you're right, Amelia, lack of transportation absolutely matters. It's just, if you don't have a car, it is real hard to get from Wheaton to, say, Germantown for a job. It just is. And I am excited about the Purple Line. Go Purple Line. We keep, hoping that it continues to move ahead. I think that will make a significant difference ultimately in transportation in that area, the down in East County. I think it will open up a lot of employment opportunities for a lot of people. So that's exciting. It's not going to be the only thing. The county does actually target some kinds of programs for that area, and actually Montgomery County Economic Development Corporation actually has also targeted some of its programs. We did a program called 3R, which was geared towards retail and restaurant sectors, and we actually geared them towards several areas in the county that are less well served. So we are working with those. That's a relatively small program. We're relatively new at this particular kind of targeting, but yeah, it exists. It's there, and we do continue to look at it and try to figure out how we can target that group of residents.
Do you have insight at this point as to what the gender distribution is of who has sought rent relief in the county from the pandemic?
I do not know. Again, that may be findable, but I personally don't know. That's one that if a person who asked that question, if you'd like to email me, I'll ask, see whether we can find out. My suspicion, though, is that based on what I heard, I spoke to the attorney at Montgomery County Legal Aid. That was yesterday, and since the proportion of the clients they worked with tended to be 65 to 70% female, that I would not be surprised if that's what we saw on that level at all. But just speculation on my part. If somebody wants that information, wants me to reach out and get an answer, I'll certainly try.
Okay. A technical question on the MIT living wage calculator. Just wanted to see if you could clarify how it takes all those different factors into account when it calculates what the necessary living wage would be based on where you are.
Oh, it's amazing. It's such an amazing tool. I really suggest just Google it, MIT living wage calculator. You'll get right to it. They list their methodology on their website, how they do it. They just piece after piece: healthcare, transportation, childcare, food, rent or mortgage. I mean, just all the things that you can possibly think of that go into an individual's budget. They actually sample them in all the jurisdictions every year, and then add it all up. And if that's what it costs in a year, that's what your living wage has to cover. It's just extraordinary. So it's great methodology. I use it very frequently because I think it's a real eye opener. And most of the economic development professionals that I know, and I'm fortunate to know many of them across the country, we use it regularly. It's one of the ways that we help our communities to really understand what a good job is. In Montgomery County, certain kind of jobs, they get a lot of pros. Oh my gosh, that company is going to have 1,000 jobs. But if they don't pay well, it may not be as much to our benefit as we would think. So, but I just encourage you to go look it up. It's And give yourself a little bit of time because it'll hook you.
Oh, I love a good open data tool. That truly is the best thing ever. We are coming close to the end, but that kind of leads me to a question I wanted to ask you. You talked a bit about how we have for so long looked to the unemployment rate as a barometer for how well or poorly we are doing economically in the country and at a local level. I wanted to know though, because you explained that that's sort of deceptive and it doesn't explain the full picture of what the jobs people have are actually paying and how well people are matched in those jobs. And it also doesn't give you any indication of how well people are feeling in those jobs. You know, if those jobs are, what is the health toll that it takes physically and mentally? I wanted to ask your opinion as somebody who is an economic development professional and studies this. Do you think it's time for a different indicator of how well we are doing besides just the unemployment rate? And if so, what do you think would be a more illustrative, a more enlightening barometer for economic strength and health in our country?
Ooh. Well, that was a leading question because I think that you probably figured out, you know, if I didn't think so, I wouldn't have presented the other ones that I showed. I do think there's no one barometer. I think that we really, our economy is a complex beast. There's a lot to look at. There's a lot of moving parts. They change all the time, and there's no one thing. So I think we have to look at a lot of things to try to keep getting that fuller picture all the time. I do think the unemployment, I've felt this for many, many years, well before the pandemic. I have always thought that the unemployment rate was just a huge undercount. Particularly since the last recession, I really have felt that a lot of people just never really returned to that full-time work that they could keep for years, and it was benefited. They had healthcare benefits. The rise of gig work is huge. I think that it masks a lot. I really do think it kind of artificially lowers the unemployment rate. I really do. Again, that's the group of people that maybe would take full-time, maybe would take something better if they felt they could. So I think there are a lot of things. I do think that the unemployment rate alone, it's countable. I think that's one reason that we use it. The Bureau of Labor Statistics can actually count it. They're very, very, they have very specified ways of getting to that rate, and they've been doing it for years. And it does have the virtue of being comparable. You can go back and look at trends, and they mean something because you're looking at it looking at the same way, month after month, quarter after quarter, year after year. So that matters. But I think that our focus on it solely is a little misguided.
All right. Well, we are pretty much out of time. So I want to thank you again. I know it flew by. That's what happens when you've got great material to work with and an excellent presenter. So thank you so much, Lynn, for sharing all of that. And we're going to gather up all of the links that we have mentioned and put in the chat, and we will try to share those out afterwards. And now I'm going to throw it back over to Cynthia to close this out for today.
Thank you, Amelia. And thank you so much, Lynn. That was an incredibly provocative presentation. I also want to thank everyone who watched this afternoon, and especially those who offered the questions that you had. It really made this afternoon an incredible experience, I'm sure, for everyone. If you've enjoyed this free program and want to learn more about the League of Women Voters' work in Montgomery County, you can find out more about us, including how to support our efforts, at LWVMOCOMD.org. And with that, we will thank you once more and hope that you enjoy the rest of your day. Take care.